All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Before we get started, we got to press got it. I just want to make sure everyone knows that this is about transition. So that final year of high school, just because the description in the brochure didn't specifically mention transition. So if you're like, that's not what I'm interested in, then just wanted to make that clear, and no worries if you need to find another session. So, okay. So just some business to take care of first. There's a QR code at the back of the wall that you can scan on your phone if you need continuing education credits. And then at the end, we'll give you a password so that you can follow the directions and get your CEUs. Okay, so my name is Anna Halverson. I started my career teaching students with autism. I moved to Wisconsin, got a master's in rehabilitation psychology, and then worked for my agency, Progressive Community Services, before we became an IRIS consultant agency as a transition coordinator, helping students exit school and enter adult services. And now I work for PCS still, but now we're an IRIS consultant agency in Dane counties and Dane and Rock counties. And I supervise IRIS consultants. So that's the experience that I'm bringing to this presentation, and I'll hand the mic over.
All right, I'm going to let the stars of the show introduce themselves first, and then I'll give you a little bit about my background. So Maria, we'll start with you.
Okay. My name is Maria Canela, and I'm from Mexico. I live here in Madison for 30 years, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the transition for my daughter.
You say your name?
My name is Anna.
Do you want to say what school you went to?
I went to Memorial High School.
Awesome. Thank you. So my name's Andrea Elsmo. I'm our final presenter here. And I actually worked with Anna and Maria when they were in the high school system in Madison. So I'm born and raised from Madison. Started out my career as a special education teacher, actually in the elementary school, and then moved my way up to transition, which is what I always wanted to do. I met Anna in our master's program for rehabilitation psychology, and I knew I always wanted to work with adults that had intellectual and developmental disabilities in the workforce. After I was a special ed teacher, I ended up being an IRIS consultant and working with Anna at Progressive Community Services. And then currently I work at Dane County Human Services, overseeing our programs for people with developmental disabilities across Dane County. So that's a little bit about my background. I've kind of been all over Madison and into employment services. Perfect. So we thought, since we weren't exactly sure who we would all have in the audience today, we thought we'd just do like a little warm up activity where we know what perspective you guys are coming from. So we'll start with a really easy question. Raise your hand if you like the season of fall. Perfect. I'm a fall lover. Raise your hand if you are a teacher. Okay, couple teachers. Raise your hand if you are a parent of someone with a disability. Perfect. Raise your hand if you are a self-advocate. I feel like there should be a lot of hands raised in this. Raise your hand if you work for an agency that supports people with disabilities out in the community. Okay. There's all the hands. And then Anna, you had a really good question. What was your question? Raise your hand.
Who likes dogs?
Oh. Awesome. Do you have any other ones?
I don't know if you like the color pink. There's guys in here.
Try it.
Who likes the color pink?
Who likes the color pink? That's one of Anna's favorite colors. Good, thank you guys. That just gives us an idea of who we're talking with today. I just want to kind of preface our whole presentation by saying, if you do have questions or comments along the way, feel free to raise your hand. And I kind of like to do things a little bit more informal so we can have a conversation about some of these practices that we use in Dane County on transition. Oh. All right, so we'll start by talking about just our historical approach to transition in Dane County, because things have changed over the last 5 years. So back in 2018, or prior to 2018, Dane County housed all of our long-term care services. So they were kind of the central entity of coordinating long-term care for individuals when they reached 21 and went into the adult world. I think we're like the last county to transition to the other model that we'll touch base on today. And so prior to 2018, what happened is Dane County, we had a grad policy is what we called it. So individuals who were exiting our school system, we encouraged them to find integrated paid employment in the community, and then they could go on and receive long-term care supports through our vocational agencies. So it was kind of like a hand-in-hand approach. After 5 years and a big change and a pandemic, here we are, and we're working now within a model that is a bit more complex, where we're involving family care, partnership, and then IRIS. So now there's a lot more players in Dane County that we weren't used to. And what we found is that has made the whole process complicated when we're exiting students and trying to get them into integrated employment. Prior to 2018, we had employment rates, which were some of the best across the state and really even the country. Of 90% of people in Dane left high school with some type of integrated employment. So whether it was 5 hours a week, 15 hours a week, 30 hours a week, it really varied, but I think the average was about 20 hours a week of integrated employment, which means they were getting paid minimum wage or above. Since then, we don't have the numbers right now because there's no central storage to it all, but we have seen a little bit more of a complex approach to getting students ready and exiting into the employment world. So now, after we've made the switch to family care and IRIS and partnership, coordinating these efforts, things have really shifted, and we've had to find creative ways to help get these grads out into the world and working, or whatever path they would like to take. So this is the graphic that kind of shows the circles up there was our Dane County grad policy. And you can see it was a lot more simple. So schools worked with Dane County long-term care, worked with DVR in order to get grads exiting the school system and into employment. This graphic down here is a bit more complex, and you can see it involving a lot more players into the process of getting employment. So now we have schools are having to work with managed care organizations or family care, IRIS organizations. Long-term care works with all the other long-term care services, but then we also have to bring it back to, if employment is the outcome that we want to obtain, we involve DVR and then the other supported employment agencies. So really things have gotten a lot more complex with where all the funding happens, who's doing the job development. And so the purpose of our presentation today is to talk through how we have navigated that across the years. And Maria and Anna will be a great example of this because they actually started with us in 2018 when everything was shifting to family care and Iris. So we'll be able to pull in some examples there. Right.
Thanks for your patience. We're going to be handing the mic back and forth. And then also if you have questions, you can raise your hand and we'll bring you the mic too. So everyone, we have people joining us online so that they can hear us. So why employment? We talk so much about employment in this field, and specifically around transition, exiting high school and entering adult services. So something that we believe in Dane County, those of us who work in the system, we have this understanding that everyone can work with the right job match and the right support. Has anyone ever had a bad job match? Like anyone? Yeah, like think about that job, right? It just was not for you for probably many, many reasons. So a lot of this is about finding the right job and the right support. And then we really emphasize employment because work creates a strong path toward better physical and mental health and well-being. And really that social piece too. Like, does anyone have friends that they work with? Like friends, one of my best friends is my coworker. So when you've been in school for so long and you're leaving the roost and you're entering the adult world, it's really important to have, of course, people around you who you can connect with and be friends with. So the Department of Health Services in Wisconsin has a really great document called the Guiding Principles of Competitive Integrated Employment. This is something that I train my staff on when we're talking about transition. And it's research-based, and it really talks about all the benefits to having competitive integrated employment. Now, the definition of competitive integrated employment, or CIE, it comes from the Workforce Innovation Act, which is federal legislation. It means a job that's part-time or full-time in which a person with a disability gets paid at or above minimum wage. It's located in an environment or a place where people are interacting with people with disabilities and people without disabilities, and where people with disabilities have access to the same benefits and opportunities as their peers without disabilities. So when we're talking about employment, those are the types of jobs that we're talking about. And everyone in our society benefits from a workforce that includes all people, where people with disabilities have opportunities and are able to find good jobs that benefit them. So another important piece of this is just that expectations from parents, teachers, other adults when a student is leaving high school, the adults around them saying, you can work if we find the right job match and we get you the right supports, and we want to follow your lead. How can we make that happen? So really starting from that place, we find is a really good tool, because coming from the other place of people being nervous about a student working and not being sure how it's going to all come together. Of course, it's a process, but the expectation that everyone can work and that we can find the right job match for you is very important. And research shows that too. Having high expectations about employment equals better employment outcomes.
All right, now we get to the people you actually want to hear from. So we thought we would pull in Anna, who was a great self-advocate in her final year, her transition year, and continues to be a wonderful self-advocate for what she wants, and talk about kind of their process for talking about employment, what that looked like, and then we'll get into further in the presentation where she's at now. So first question, let's start maybe with Maria. When you think of employment and Anna working, what were your first thoughts of that when the schools brought it up in her final year?
It was really hard for me to try to think, for a job for her. So I was kind of a little bit lost. And, the teacher was talking about some programs. I don't know if now it's a little bit different, probably, yeah, because I saw this morning is a lot of agencies around here. So like, being a mom, a single mom, sometimes, it's kind of like what she can do or how it's going to be for her. Because if it is hard for everybody, I'm thinking, for somebody like her, it's going to be tough. But yeah, I got a lot of help, and I know she can do a lot of things. So, and I always got the support with you guys. So
Great. And Anna, can you tell us well, let's start with in high school, one of your volunteer experiences. Where was that at?
Was it Memorial?
Mhm.
Memorial High School.
Yep. And where did you volunteer? Remember the center close by?
The Lucier Center.
What were some of the things you did there and what did you learn?
Like we did some lunch and breakfast for elderly people, and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Maria, can you talk a little bit about some of those volunteer experiences at Memorial? How did that set Anna up for her future job when she was exiting?
well, she was helping, at the kitchen, and she was always ready to go and help. And in the kitchen, she never do nothing at home, but there she was really good. So I think, was a really nice experience for her. And after, she was working in a pizzeria.
So a lot of those skills that Anna learned in high school with those volunteer experiences really helped her prepare for her first job when she was exiting high school. And Anna, what was your first job? Actually, you had two of them. You remember?
One was a pizza. Oh, those two. So one was Luigi's and the other one was Yahara Bay.
Yep. So Luigi's was the pizzeria that you were talking about, and Yahara Bay is a distillery. And I think you did some cleaning there. Did you do labeling? No, just cleaning. Okay. Nice. Good. So those were some of Anna's first experiences. Her first job when she was 20, 21, exiting school. We set her up as a team, which we'll kind of talk about what a team looks like. As a team, we set her up to have these two different jobs so it could fill her day. So in the morning, you would go to Luigi's. Do you remember what time?
I think, do you remember? 9 to 11.
Yep. And then in the afternoon, where did you go?
Yahara Bay. But 1 to 3 for Yahara Bay.
Yep, exactly. So we set up a day where she had two different jobs, two different shifts, and in the middle, it gave her some time to do lunch and community day services because that was important for her. So talking about a transition team. So I know I mentioned this. We have an activity that will go with this. So start thinking about whether you're a student, a parent. I think a lot of you just worked in the field in an agency. If you can think of an individual that you work with that could benefit, well, everyone can benefit from a transition team and what that would actually look like for them. So who would you bring to the table in their final year or in a transition year? And we have some suggestions and then we'll talk about Anna's team. But a transition team for us in Madison and Dane County, what we're looking at is having DVR involved. So everyone has an open DVR case in their final year. In Dane County, we have counselors, DVR counselors that are assigned to certain areas. So certain school districts, which is really nice. So you should have like a main contact with DVR. And then we also involve long-term care case manager, an IRIS consultant, a managed care manager, partnership. If a nurse is needed or on the team, you should involve them in this. School district staff, obviously, they're the ones who have probably been with the individual the longest. And so making sure the teacher is involved in the process of letting the team know what has worked, what volunteer experiences they've been having, what they're currently doing. They're going to be the experts that have probably known the student for the longest on this team. Well, other than the guardian, of course. And then in Madison, we have vocational futures planning services. So some areas of the state, you might see this service where it's an extra layer of support for job development, coordination, and making sure that the ship is moving forward for someone to gain employment and a meaningful day. Of course, the student, they're at the center of it all. Any residential support. So if your loved one is in an adult family home or not living at home and maybe on their own at that time, make sure that they're involved in the conversation. Guardian, parents, other family members we've had, any behavioral experts or consultants, and then, yeah, if you have neighbors, friends, respite workers, those are all good people to include. So with the activity that Anna just handed out, I believe, we're going to give you, oh, I don't know, like 10 minutes, Anna. Okay. To think of a student or think of yourself or think of a loved one, whoever makes the most sense, and fill out a form about what their team would look like, what supports these different people could provide to them. So on this sheet, we've really broken it down pretty broadly. What can family and friends do to help support a transition to employment? What can school supports do? What can your long-term care providers do to help? And then just all the other DVR, any other special service that you might have. So go ahead, we'll take 10 minutes. Anna and I will just kind of circle around too and see what kind of brainstorm you guys are having. Oh, yeah, sure. Cool.
Also, like you can just use that form for like what the experience you're coming in with. Like maybe you don't know what DVR will do in a transition, and that's what we'll talk about. So, and then feel free to like work as a team if you have people that you want to work with. All right. Does anyone have anything they like learned from someone else at the table or something, anything they have a question about when you're talking about your transition team? Anyone got anything to share? Yeah, great. Here, I'm going to give you this.
Just one thing that I thought was important that we learned is that some people might feel like they're supported financially, but not emotionally, and finding connection and community.
Yeah, what an awesome point. We talk a lot in this about funding, and of course, having funding sources in place and ready to go is very important. But when it is only about that, I'm sure it can feel isolating and cold. And what a good point. Did you have something?
One of the things we talked about was just kind of the disconnect that seems to happen in really letting parents understand all the things that are available. Some don't realize that there are funding sources. Some don't understand the scope of things that are available. Like a job doesn't have to look like a traditional job. It can be a 2-hour shift. There are job coaches available, things like that that parents just aren't aware of. And frankly, I used to be a high school teacher, and sometimes I don't think we do a very good job of sharing that information with parents.
Yeah, also a great point. It's like you've seen future slides because we're going to get into that. Awesome. Anyone else have anything they want to share with the group? Anyone online? Okay. Great.
Yeah, I saw Maria nodding her head as you just said that comment that parents don't always know what is available. And I think Maria can really agree to that. And Maria, if you don't mind, can you just talk a little bit about how you learned of some of those services and how you're probably still learning as Anna has gotten older?
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm still learning, and yeah, like what you said, 2018 was so tough for me to learn what was available for my daughter. And it took me really long time to realize like we really have a lot of things we can, ask for support. And yeah, in the community, is growing up, and I see is more people they need it. And yeah, if the teachers or I don't know really how they can help us, because I know it is a lot of things. I really don't know what, I can use for her.
And as we talk about the transition team and all of the different players, we're coming from all these different perspectives. In your mind, who helped you understand some of the things that Anna could do after high school? Who was on the team that kind of drove that idea for you?
Well, in the beginning was the school, the teacher. She's the one that start kind of talking about it and kind of pushing me to do some things and talking about that this is a different country for me. You guys do things different. That is another point, like people from different countries we don't know. Was another guy, I don't remember now the name, Carlos. Yeah, Marcos, yeah. That guy is the one told me, I need to apply for her social security. And I said, I'm doing okay. I have my job. She don't need it. And he told me, it's not because you don't need it. She need it. It is something, it's a right for her. So I did it. So was people around was pushing me to do things, and it's the way I've been learning. Like I said before, for me to be a single mom, sometimes it's a little hard because, I need to provide everything for her. But when if we have something easy to go and look or people can share, it's going to be easy for everybody to have those agencies to help us.
Perfect. And Marcos is from our ADRC, the Aging Disability Resource Center in Madison, in Dane County. So he was the one that helped provide information. In Madison, we host a lot of educational events about transition. And so that's probably where Marco's information was shared and stemmed from. And so as a teacher or working in an agency, trying to provide some of this general information out to the community is really helpful. So then parents understand what options they have. Yep.
And that no matter where you are in Wisconsin, as most of you probably know, the ADRC, the Aging and Disability Resource Center, is your gateway to see what is available in terms of long-term support and other support for people with disabilities. So that's not Dane County specific. That's everywhere. Google ADRC in whatever county you live in, if that's new information.
Yeah, thanks for that. So we'll hear from Anna a little bit about what her transition team looked like the final year. Let's see. There we are. I love that picture of you with your gown outside the Cole Center. All right, so there were quite a few people. So one thing, when we have long-term care agencies and supported employment agencies involved, usually our team meetings are about 10 to 15 people, depending on the student's needs. So that just reinforces the importance to continue scheduling these, and we'll talk about that a little bit further down the road. But so Anna, who was part of your team?
Me.
You. Most important.
And guardian, my mom. And then for transition is my old teacher. And then for support, broker from PCS.
Do you remember who that was? That was her.
Anna.
Anna.
And what? Transition appointment specialist from Madison Metro School District, LEA from Madison Metro School District. Then long-term care service provider, Goodwill.
Exactly. So that was her final year's team multiplied. And I think that's where we all met each other, which is awesome. So we got to work with them in that final year and have these different perspectives on how to best support Anna and Maria to get to what they wanted her day to look like after high school.
Can you go back to that one? I just want to, someone had a good question at that one of these tables. So just to clarify, and DVR isn't on here. So she also had a DVR counselor. Sorry about that. And then long-term care service provider. So when we keep saying long-term care, we're talking about IRIS Family Care Partnership, which all across Wisconsin, those are the long-term care agencies that then fund the long-term care services. So Goodwill was funded both by DVR during the transition temporarily, and then ongoing Goodwill was funded by IRIS, which is Anna's long-term care agency. So I just wanted to clarify because saying all these terms over and over again and speaking shorthand like we do, we're trying to not use abbreviations either. So, okay. So transition toolbox. So we're going to talk about some of these in more detail. These are what Andrea and I think of as key tools that we bring into transition team meetings. So job development, finding employment, job coaching, support once employment is found, keeping it student-centered, employment as an expectation, which I mentioned at the beginning, creative problem solving within the team, and then supported self-direction. Does anyone here have an example or like maybe a definition of supported self-direction or a way that it maybe has played out in your life? I'll bring you the mic if anyone wants to talk about supported self-direction. All right.
I just have an idea. I might be wrong, but I'm thinking, so could be a parent that is helping their child through transition. Like one of the examples could be supported decision-making.
Awesome. Thank you. That was, yeah, for sure. So in IRIS, the program that I work in, IRIS is a self-directed service program. So a guardian or a person with a disability, it is the final decision maker within program policy, right? But we like to really emphasize like the supported at the beginning of that. Like self-direction isn't just like, okay, go figure it out. Self-direction is that you get to make the decision, but that you have supports around you helping you understand the lay of the land, what resources are available, what your options are. So that just is a really important piece in the transition process because it can get really complicated with funding and with all of the players within it. I also wanted to mention something between, this is just kind of like the big picture, high level stuff. So the Department of Public Instruction, which is in charge of all the public schools, the Department of Health Services, which is what IRIS and Family Care are under, and then the Department of Workforce Development, which is what DVR is under, Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. So these are the three big funders or the main funders in the transition process. So at the top levels, those people who are in charge of these departments, some of you might be those people, decided that we really need to figure out how to work together, because what we don't want is a transition team meeting where all of the professionals who represent those agencies I just mentioned are sitting around saying, actually, we're the funder of last resort. Yeah, no, we can't fund that. Everyone else has to fund that first. Oh, actually, the schools can't fund that because X, Y, and Z. So I've been in those meetings. I know Andrea has, I know other people are nodding their heads. So what's cool is that Wisconsin, these big, huge entities said, we need a memorandum of understanding. So we need an agreement that says that we're not going to do that. We need an agreement that says that our attitude in these meetings is going to be, yes, let's figure it out. And let's figure out who the best funder is for these services. So this isn't, if you want like a link to this document that I just mentioned, the memorandum of understanding, see me after and I can get that to you. But it's just sometimes I think helpful to understand that there is policy in place that is supposed to make this happen. So if you're in a meeting, you're like, hey, that thing's happening. Everyone is saying they can't figure this out and that they can't fund this, even though someone should be able to. There's something to point to say that's actually not right. Like we need to change the tone of this. Sorry, I forget the clicker.
Great. Thanks for explaining that. That was like very plain language. Loved it. Okay, so one of the tools in our toolbox in Madison that we work on is making sure job development is a part of that final year, that process. So job development, what we're doing is really making sure, like for example, with Anna and Maria's team, making sure we identify who the person is or who the people are. It could be multiple entities doing the job development piece. So making sure that they're out there looking for employment, talking with employers, customizing jobs, making sure that it matches the student's unique interests and abilities. Whoever that person is should really be the one trying to help push forward progress, run that ship, run those meetings if they can, or if there's a couple people identifying someone to run the meeting. And part of that is really just making sure there's some accountability on all team players. So for Anna's team, we had DVR was helping with some of the job development. We had a transition employment specialist through the school district that was helping with job development. And then we also have all the teachers in Madison in that final year helping with job development. So there's a lot of players and a lot of people out there making connections with employers, which is definitely an important part of making sure that we find the best match. Keeping it student-centered. So that's another part of the job development process that is extremely important. So making sure that you're not just out there looking for jobs, seeing where the help wanted signs are, you're actually thinking of the student and what type of environments they like to be in, what type of tasks or experiences they've already had that were good or bad. And that kind of help drives where you're going to meet with employers, where you're going to customize that job and make sure that it's a good fit. And then throughout the year, that final year with job development, we always make sure that there's a running agenda or like a running Google document for people to check into to make sure they know who's doing what the action steps are. Setting the next meeting up before you end the last one, that's been really huge, especially for these big teams where you're involving 15 professionals from all over. And so making sure you talk about like if there's a good reoccurring meeting date, or if you just set a date based on what a schedule can allow. So, and then in most teams, we meet monthly. So I know IEPs only happen annually, but we're typically meeting monthly with teams, especially in their final year, just because there are so many different factors to take into account. And we just want to make sure that they're ready and prepared to set up for a good transition. Sometimes in the event there is a really complex situation, you can of course meet more than that. Or if things are going smooth and you've been placed on a job and the team is feeling comfortable about the plan, you can push that back. So everything's pretty fluid. And I think that's an important thing to realize as a professional too. So Anna is passing out a sample agenda. That's fairly lengthy, but feel free to use it within your agencies for students in their final year, because it really hits on some of those big pieces that we like to make sure to talk through as a team and get everyone's opinion on. Some of it is not going to be applicable to the individual that is the meeting's about. So keeping it student-centered and taking out some of those pieces is just fine. Adjust it accordingly and put it in your own Google Doc or put your own header on it, and then, yeah.
Yeah, and just also if you're a parent or a student who's self-directing. You can bring agendas to team meetings. If you're like, I really want to make sure we talk about X, Y, and Z. I really encourage you to like use that, modify it, pull out the pieces that make sense to you and just help keep people on track. So job coaching, of course, another important piece. A big piece of this is finding a vocational agency that is a good match for you. Of course, like different parts of Wisconsin have different number of providers out there who have job coaches to support you. So some people have fewer choices, but DVR should be a agency that really helps you figure that piece out and helps you figure out like what questions you want to ask vocational agencies, which we also call like supported employment providers. So the agency that's employing the job coaches that will help you at your job. Another big piece is that once you identify who's going to be your job coach, once your high school teachers are not your job coach anymore, then fading those school supports in April or May of a final year or earlier, if that's appropriate, because we believe that it's really important that you get the experience of what it's going to be like with that job coach, with those job coaches that are not part of your school while you're still in school. Because if your teachers know you best and your teachers understand what you need on the job to be successful, then it's great if this fading of supports is happening while you're still in school, while teachers can still be helping and training your new job coaches. So that what we don't want is that you exit school June 5th, all your job coaches at your jobs are your school staff. And then June 6th, all of a sudden you have all these new people who maybe you haven't even met before. So that's why we really talk about like a fading approach of pulling in job coaches for training during the school year. And another piece is having cost-effective supports, which is not just about, maximizing your IRIS budget or, your family care organization saying we need the most cost-effective option, which is certainly a piece that we all have to keep in mind. But it's also about just the least restrictive support model. So if someone is at a job and has a job coach kind of standing right beside them the whole time, but only really needs the job coach for the beginning or the end, like that doesn't feel great. I mean, I don't want someone watching over my shoulder when I'm doing my jobs if I don't need that help. So it's really about like the most integrated approach, which is often the most cost-effective support too. And I'll just mention partners of business. I'm going to hand it over to Andrea and Anna to talk about this because Anna experienced something like that where she was over supported and just luckily had a great team who helped her fade those supports. So partners with business, has anyone heard of partners with business? Okay, some people are raising their hands. So partners with business is really cool. It's just this idea that that an employer there might be a supervisor or a coworker who's already working there who can really help the person with a disability get what they need to be successful at the job. So there are ways in Wisconsin in all the long-term care programs where we can actually fund that employer to provide those supports. And then usually there's a vocational agency affiliated as well who can kind of serve as a safety net of support. We've done all different kinds of models of this. It's really cool and customizable. And the BPDD, who's putting on this conference, they have worked on the grants and initiatives to help spread this around Wisconsin. So if you're interested in partners with business, you can see me afterward and I can point you in the right direction.
Great. So we'll talk with Anna and Maria a little bit about what that fading of support and then what the ongoing supports look like and how we problem solved as a team. So originally Anna, you were supported by your teachers at Luigi's, at the pizza place, and at Yahara Distillery. And then eventually, do you remember what agency came in to support you?
Goodwill.
Yep. And so I think it was, and my memory isn't great, but it was probably in April or May that we started to introduce you to Goodwill staff, right? And do you remember going to Goodwill ever before you exited high school?
Yeah, one time.
One time, yeah. So we took Anna into Goodwill, which was the long-term care supported employment agency, so that they could make a connection. And we knew that was important for Anna, and get trained also by the job coaches at your school, like Jessica, and trying to think some of your other support staff, your the SEAs that helped you. Do you remember them?
One of them.
One, do you remember her name?
Was it Barb?
I think so.
Barb.
Barb, yep. So Barb was one of the job coaches. Do you remember any of the other job coaches at Memorial? Maria? No. It was 5 years ago. That's fine.
Julie? Julie? No.
No, I don't think so. So we did like a slow fading of the school supports, brought in the adult support staff, overlapped them for a while, and then made sure they understood what the ongoing support model could look like for Anna. So originally, when Anna was first learning the job, there was someone on site with you at all times, right? And did you have a coworker? At Luigi's?
No. What was it, Julie? Who was it?
I forget what their name was, but you had a coworker, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So she was able to share supports at Luigi's and actually at Yahara Bay. And that meant there was only one person that was able to bounce between the two individuals that needed some extra support on the job, to make a paired support model is what we called it. And that was just a more cost-effective way to do it. We knew Anna, once she got started on a task, she was able to just go with it. And so it was just overbearing to have two people there supporting the two folks that needed some guidance throughout their shift. So we just slowly got to that point with Anna. And I think Goodwill took it and replicated that once she was out of the high school system. So we really advocated, Anna, Maria, myself, the teachers, that this was the best model for her to be as independent as possible on the job ongoing.
Okay, this is my favorite, keeping it student-centered. So I want us to think about all of these different elements in terms of like, if imagine you're in a transition team meeting or really in any sort of meeting where you're talking about supports for someone with a disability who needs some help getting everything in place. So listening, like actually, I'm speaking as like a professional in these meetings, like listening to the student. What do they really want? Honoring choice, dignity of risk, encouraging and informing. So finding the balance between gentle encouragement, helping people understand what their options are. And then this dignity of risk piece is a really big piece for me, because how do any of us find what job works for us? Does anyone have like an example of a first job that they hated? I would love to hear about. Yeah, does anyone want to share about a first job that was not the right fit for them? All right.
So I don't have an example of a first job, but this is, I think, really important for things to think about as far as like pushing the job developer more too. In interviewing, you interview with your job. It seems like the perfect job on paper. Their core values align with yours, blah, blah, blah. And you get there and it's just not a good fit. And then it just like that experience overall just really makes me wonder, as a job developer, as job coaches, as a transition team, are we having those same conversations and interviews that you yourself would have, like with an interviewer and with a job? And what are those questions that we can be asking employers outside of like, what are the hours? And by the way, this is what a job coach is. And this person is going to have a job coach.
Awesome. Really good point. Yeah, I think this idea of like, sometimes the first job you get is not the right one for you. And perhaps the only way you ever would have figured that out is by doing the job and realizing it was not the right job for you, right? Like everyone deserves the opportunity to say, hey, I really want to work in fast food. And even though my mom and my teacher says it's a really bad idea, like that's where I want to be. Like, okay, well then let's listen to the student saying that's what they want to do and let them try it out. And let them have a variety of job experiences so they can really figure it out. Do you have anything to share? Have you ever had a job that you didn't like? Can you tell us about it? Like a job, you had a job that wasn't a good match?
Taco Bell.
Taco Bell?
It was
Awesome. She said it was way too fast for her to make the food and look at the computer. So what a good example. Awesome.
I had a job at Myers, and maybe like a year before that, I had brain surgery, and so I was kind of wobbly. And the guy that I worked under, he bought me a wheelchair to sit in, you know, because I couldn't stand long. And managers would walk past me and say, I wish I could sit down on my job, you know. And, you know, they would just like, you know, so it was kind of frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like a really toxic environment to try to just be doing your job and being yourself. So a really good example. I included, does anyone else have a first job or a bad job they want to share about? I love hearing about people's first jobs that they hated. I think it's really fun. Okay. I included a couple questions in here to think about when you're in a transition meeting. Does the student feel heard? Or if you are the student, like, am I being heard? Are the meetings accessible? Like, is the meeting occurring at a time where the students in class and like can't show up? So, or maybe the parents or guardian is at work and can't be there. So how are we making sure that everyone who needs to attend can attend? And then what's the purpose and tone of the meetings? So, you know, I think that those are really important questions to ask in terms of like keeping it student-centered, because ultimately the transition process is about what does the student want their day to look like once they're done with high school. And if we lose the student's choice and wishes in that process, then, you know, I don't really know what the point is then. So.
Yeah, and to kind of go off of that, so the next slide, thinking creatively about transition. So being flexible, I think everybody kind of nods their head and laughs a little bit when it's like, yeah, what was your first job? I know mine was at a sporting goods store, and I only got it because my brother could drive me there, and it just wasn't a great match. But anyways, you have to have those jobs and those experiences in order to find out where you want to go. So I know when we were working with Anna and doing job development and trying to think creative with her, she wasn't necessarily super excited about the cleaning parts of her job, I remember. Is that right, Anna? Yeah. And your favorite thing, actually, I'll have you share. What was your favorite thing to do at Luigi's?
Doing the pepper shakers and Parmesan cheese.
Yeah, so that was one of her favorite tasks to do at that place, and that was wonderful, but the cleaning stuff just wasn't her thing. So ultimately we knew like this probably isn't going to be a job that is going to be forever. It's not going to be your career path forever, but it sure is a good experience to realize how much you loved filling pepper shakers and Parmesan shakers, but also to realize what kind of environment she liked to be in as well. So at Luigi's, for example, you still talk to, I think, the manager there. She has since gotten a new job. So she still talks to the manager. She loved the small staffing ratio, and she could really connect with people socially there. And so that was way more important. And that got her through those ucky cleaning tasks that most of us don't like to do. So we just had to get creative about that, and Anna was open to trying it out, and it was a great experience for her. And I think you learned some of the things you really liked about working and some of the things you didn't like so much, right? So being flexible and open to new ideas. And then capitalizing on student interests. So another fun little story. We did some job development for an individual that was exiting, and his unique interest was that he didn't really care what the job was, but he wanted to wear a lab coat, like a science coat. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's very unique. Sounds cool though, and sounds very official. So we went with it and we did some job development and tried to carve out positions in different labs around Madison and figure out what we could do just so he could wear this lab coat. It really didn't matter what the task was. And so we ended up finding him a job, and he, I'm not going to say the lab, but he works at a lab now and does some routine organizing of test tubes. But most important, he doesn't really care about that part, but he gets to wear a lab coat every day. And it just makes his day. And that's what he wakes up for. And that's just an example of kind of a unique interest and skill that has really brought him to feel successful on the job and want to continue doing it and wake up in the morning and be ready to go to work. Another way to think creatively is introduce students to a variety of experiences. I kind of already talked about that. So just making sure that you encourage families to be open to different things, and you know, you'll learn, like Anna probably never knew she enjoyed filling things up before she worked at Luigi's. And so now that was something that she can learn from and go off of for future job development. The last one is transition schedules. So being creative about transition schedules. So really for all of us, our high school day looked a lot different than when we exited high school, right? So whether that be you went to college or you went to a technical school, or you stayed at home, had a year off, or you went right into the workforce, it is not going to look like the school day. And I think really that final year, having conversations, like real life conversations, being realistic with parents and teams, that it's just not going to look like that. And we all go through that. And so you kind of have to figure out what your non-negotiables in a schedule are and where you need to fill in supports, fill in a job, fill in supervision, whatever it may be based on your students' needs. So these are just two examples right now of students going through the transition program, getting ready to exit. And as you can see, even their schedules look a little bit different. So one student on Mondays, they don't really have a whole lot going on, and it's kind of their half day off. So they do an art working course, and then they're off the rest of the day, and they can be supported either by family. In this case, they live in an adult family home, so they can be supported there. But making sure you understand, like, that is okay in this case, and this is what the schedule is that we want to look like when they exit into the adult world. On Tuesdays and the rest of the week, it looks like they have a 9 to 11 shift in the morning, kind of like what I was talking about with Anna's schedule. So a lot of times we base it around like a short shift in the morning, a lunch break, a short shift in the afternoon. Maybe afternoons aren't good for people, or maybe mornings aren't good for people. That's probably a better thing to relate to. So maybe their day doesn't start till 10 o'clock. And that's okay with the family, that's okay with the support system, because you can pull in other services, you can pull in family, you can pull in neighbors, whatever it is. And those are pieces that you want to talk through with your transition teams and get creative about, because the reality is you're not going to have an 8 to 3 o'clock schedule. That, you know, that's just not going to happen like you have in the school system. Yeah. We don't have any schedules to share, so.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the self-direction piece in a final year of high school. All of these pieces are pieces that can happen whether you're in family care partnership or you're in a more directly self-directed program like IRIS, to different degrees. So one important piece is making sure your long-term care case manager, IRIS consultant, is involved and knows you're in your final year of high school. Invite them to IEP meetings. Perhaps they can't go to everyone. And of course, we want them to be a part of transition team meetings too. But I think involving them is really important, because they're going to need to like understand what you need when you're done with high school and how to get it on your plan. teachers and long-term care DVR, asking them to help you if you need help planning team meetings. Like that can happen no matter what long-term care program you're in. Directing the process within DVR. So, making sure you're attending DVR meetings, that the DVR counselor is coming to your transition team meetings, choosing a supported employment provider, which I would say tap into the professionals on your transition team to get help with that. Does the school work with a couple of supported employment agencies that they have really good relationships with? That can make it easy. Who can DVR recommend to you as well? And then a transition document that can leave school with the student. So this can be really individualized. I mean, it should be really individualized. Andrea and I have created and seen a bunch of these. Sometimes they're called like employment transition records, but basically like when I talked about, we don't want June 5th to June 6th be like, all of a sudden now teachers are gone. I'm supported by a supported employment agency. We also don't want to lose all of the knowledge that the school has, that you've worked with the school to build up about what you need to be successful. So making sure that your team has a way to like capture it. Maybe it's a shared Google Doc that people break into sections and add information. Maybe you or your parent creates this. So I think that transition document piece is really important. And then just asking for help from your team with all of these pieces to make sure that the end goal is that you are involved in the direction of your final transition year.
Great. So we've talked a lot about like tools, strategies, things that we can do to help make the transition smooth. However, we all know as professionals and families and people in this community, it doesn't always go perfect, right? So there are hiccups along the way. And I think, hearing it, a big reason why we brought in Maria and Anna for this presentation too, is because not only did they transition in 2018 and have a job and go through learning all of the long-term care agencies, all the lingo, but then there was a pandemic, and then there was a stop in the work. There was a couple job changes, and here we are 5 years out, a lot has happened. And so I think knowing that all of this planning that we do as professionals and as teams, it really sets them up for, even though things are going to change down the road, things are not going to be sedentary. That's just not the way this world works. But knowing that you have a base where you came from and well thought out plans and the employment transition record that continue with you after school and other information and supported employment agency there, those are going to be the people that will continue pushing forward, continue pushing the ship so that you have a schedule that you guys are happy with. Now, what I want Anna and Maria to talk about a little bit is just where we are at now, how we've gotten there, and then just the job changes you've seen since high school. I'll have maybe Maria explain a little bit about that process, like when things changed.
You talking about after the pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
it started at the pandemic.
Well, yeah, when everything started, was really hard because she really liked to go to work. And at some point they said, we have to stay home. And so she was there, all the time. Was no fun, was no easy for her. And finally, probably after a year, was like she started going out again. I was lucky and I was able to go to work every day, but she was at home. So of course it's different because she was working more hours before. Now she's only working a few hours a week. Of course it's different because we can talk about money, it's different. And it's been so hard, but she's still going to Goodwill too for a few hours to just hang out and do some projects because she really liked to be around people. But this thing came to change everybody's life. But I think, in some point it's gonna be a little better.
Absolutely. And can you talk a little bit about what like her support team looks like now? That it's a lot smaller than what it was in high school, but who's helping you with the job part? Because she does have a job, it's just different now. And who's helping you advocate for that?
Well, Goodwill is helping. You guys are helping, so we have different, agencies helping us to do it, and I hope, be more, because she really wanna go back to kind of normal, what is normal for her.
And I think when she exited high school, she was at probably about 20 hours a week of work. 15 to 20. More than that? Nice. So
Like probably 5 a week, 5 hours a week.
yep. And so one thing that you two have done, I think ongoing, is advocate for yourself with, Anna does want to add more hours into her workday. So finding your team in the adult world and keeping that communication going. You may not be meeting as frequently, or it may not be as intense, but making sure you still advocate for that support. And I know when I was your IRIS consultant, we always talked about, that was actually during the pandemic, we talked about a lot how you wanted to go back to work and you wanted to have activities. So you started to go to Goodwill. So now let's see, after Luigi's and Yahara Bay, what was your next job?
Logic.
And what did you do at Logic?
So we have delivered snacks for the kids.
Yep. So Anna always wanted to work in childcare too. So we talked about what that could look like. And at a daycare in Madison that has since closed, unfortunately, she was helping kids out with snacks and cleaning up after them, right? So then after she lost that job, where did you go and what are you doing now? Store?
Yeah. What's it called? Rogan's.
Yep.
So I'm at Rogan's.
Yep. Rogan's Shoes. And what do you do there?
Clean 2 bathrooms.
You clean bathrooms there? You went back to cleaning?
Yes.
Do you organize shoes? You're such a fashionista.
No.
No. Do you like the environment?
No. No.
It's a different shoe store.
No,
Oh.
store is closet.
Oh, Plato's Closet.
Yeah.
Oh, say that.
Yeah. It was Plato's Closet.
Plato's Closet. So that's where she's currently at. So she went from Luigi's and Yahara Bay for 20, 25 hours a week to going through the pandemic, losing those jobs, finding a job at a daycare with her supported employment agency. The daycare closed, so she had to find another new job. So there was a lot of self-advocation that they had to do to make sure Anna continued to work. And that's still going on. You're still wanting to find more work, right? Or have you gotten used to not working?
Yeah, I'm not used to work.
You're nodding your head. So hopefully you guys will go back, talk to your teams now to make sure that you can add more meaningful activity into her day. So I just like to share this example because it's not perfect, and what she exited with is not what her day looks like now. And that's real life. And it's just an important thing to keep in mind. So.
Okay, I passed out an activity. I'm gonna read this first scenario. Jared is a young man with Down syndrome and is entering his final year of high school. Jared has had a few work experiences while in the 18 to 21 program funded by DVR, at Culver's, at a local Italian restaurant, and at a nursing home doing food prep. Jared's supervisors and job coaches reported that he did a fantastic job, but Jared is not enthusiastic about a long-term job at any of the places he's tried. So if you can like take a few minutes with your table to just look through these questions, what do these jobs have in common? What type of collaboration might help problem solve this with Jared? What questions the team might ask Jared to help figure it out? And then you can tell I'm obsessed with, have you ever had a job you didn't like? Because most of us have. And what are some factors? So just take a few minutes to share with your table. All right, it sounds like some good conversations. Does any table want to share something that they talked about for any of these questions? Anyone want to share? Oh, thank you.
We talked a little bit about the interests. So the students only worked in the food. So we talked about job shadows or exploring what's out there. Just asking them what they want because food service or food kitchen work is not working out.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Joe. So that's what all those jobs had in common, right? Maybe that just was the wrong field. And so questions to get at that might have helped. Anyone else? Do you want to share?
Yeah, so like when if a certain job you don't like, and like the job I really did not really enjoy was cleaning at Charlie's on Main, where it was like closed, and so it's like people like very empty, like no people to be around, and it got pretty boring. I think it'll last like less than a month. And they were talking, I think they were talking, which was very important, like there's someone that like this person goes up to, who was a disability, goes up to like winter break or whatever, so they had some good information.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Very different. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else have anything to share about this scenario? Okay, we only have a few minutes left, so we'll move on to this last one. Angie is in the last half of her final year of high school. And she's had a job for 2 years working at a movie theater in town, cleaning and taking tickets. Angie is autistic and loves movies. Being able to see movies for free is a big perk for her. Her school staff stop by once a week to check in with Angie and make sure she's doing well. Lately, Angie's been having problems with a couple other workers around her age at the movie theater, but her supervisor and job coach aren't sure what's going on. Angie likes her job and wants to keep it, but she's been experiencing high levels of anxiety because of negative social interactions. So the questions here are, how can Angie's transition team support her in navigating the social issues at work? What could the supervisor and job coach be missing here, and how could they get the information they need? What are creative ways that Angie might be able to keep and enjoy her job? And then, have you ever had interpersonal issues with coworkers? I mean, who hasn't, right? And what are some ways you maybe have resolved these? So take a few minutes to talk at the table and think about what you want to share with the big group. Okay, does anyone have anything to share from this second scenario? What should the team be asking Angie, or what do you think's missing? Awesome.
So we, for the second question, what could the supervisor and job coach be missing here, and how could they get the information they need? We spoke about, like, if there is a job coach, we think that they can be monitoring a little bit what's going on around this employee, because there is something obviously going on, and also have direct communication with the employee, try to create a sense of trust and see what's going on. What else? And for the first question, we spoke about communication between the parent or caregiver directly with the employee and trying to see what is going on.
Awesome. Yeah, fantastic. That's yeah, that's what was going through my head too. How do we get underneath, try to figure out what's really going on? Because if you don't even know what the problem is, then how do we help Angie address that? So anyone else have anything to share about that last scenario? Oh, thank you. Sorry.
I would provide all-inclusive training to the other team members. Because I think it's really important that we set aside any biases that we have or things like that, because we have to, work with them, because everybody comes from different backgrounds. So everybody's going to have different ideas, and just, promoting that empathy and or understanding. And I think that it would be good to include a training in there as well for everyone.
Yeah, what a good suggestion. I mean, teenagers scare me. So when you're working at a movie theater, that can be maybe trickier than other places. But I think that's a great point that, we all have different needs on a job. And if there's maybe certain things that are like really triggering to Angie that do not need to be part of the interaction with coworkers, like how do we do that in a sensitive way that Angie's okay with? That's not, over disclosing that she's a part of it too.
I think too, we support people in their jobs. And what I tend to see sometimes is our young adults with disabilities are very responsible and like to do everything that the employer wants them to do. And if they have maybe high school students that are hired or other individuals who try not to work, I think they sort of look at our young adults with disabilities as, creating a problem because you're working too much. And so I do think that some of the things that we've had to do is we've had to really talk with the employer and make sure they understand how stressful it is for our young adult to just be doing what's right. And so we end up having to we ended up with checklists where, okay, here's the checklist of the tasks that need to be done. And these are the ones that you're going to be doing. And these are the ones that you're going to be doing, so that there's no conflicts between who's leaving work for other people and things like that. And so I think that has come up a lot. And I just sort of feel like that's created the most anxiety for our young adults, is that they were trying to do their job, yet they feel like they're the ones that are doing poorly, and they're not. They're doing great.
Awesome. Thank you. What a good point. We only have, I think, 1 minute left. So oh, nope, it's time. So thank you so much for coming. If you have questions for any of us, please feel free to stick around. Do you want me to share the code? Because yeah, system with a capital S for the QR code in the back if you need CEUs. So, and fill out the surveys. Thank you. Hey, thank you, everyone.